Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Election 2010 hits the final stretch as Republicans remain poised to make big gains. Watching the latest poll numbers is political analyst and pollster Doug Schoen. He is the author of the brand new book called Mad as Hell, a bestseller which he co-wrote with pollster Scott Rasmussen. Doug joins us now from New York. Welcome back to Newsmax TV, Doug.
Thank you for having me, Kathleen.
A Wall Street Journal NBC poll finds the GOP is still poised for major gains in the midterms, with Republicans holding a 50 to 43% lead. But their poll also finds that 46% favor a Democratic-controlled Congress, while 44% want Republicans in control. What do you make of this?
Well, I think the Republicans have yet to close the argument. There's widespread dissatisfaction with President Obama and the Democratic Congress, but there isn't really a strong reservoir of support for the Republican Party as a governing party. The Republicans are now really the repository of anti-democratic and anti-Obama sentiment, but the Republicans still have a long way to go to convince people that they should be in charge.
Doug, critics say that President Obama's central political problem is his failure to connect with white working-class voters. How much of this white working-class angst is translating into votes for Republicans? And are votes for Republicans simply a vote against Obama, whether voters like the candidate or not?
Yeah, my sense is that one of the most evident areas of weakness for the Democrats is indeed white working-class voters. I think it's less a question of the president not connecting than supporting policies that white working-class voters, and indeed lots of voters of all races, colors, and incomes, reject. And the big government approach, the increased debt, the increased deficit, and the health care bill, I think, have put highly squeezed white working-class voters, many of whom have either lost a job or have somebody in their immediate circle of friends or family who's lost a job. Those voters are increasingly dissatisfied with policies that they find objectionable.
NBC News says that 100 seats are in play. Politico is reporting that 99 Democrat-held seats are in danger. The Cook Political Report predicts a GOP net gain of at least 40 House seats, with 90 Democratic seats as competitive or likely Republican. Your friend, pollster Scott Rasmussen, predicts Republicans will gain 55 House seats. How many Democratic seats do you see going from blue to red?
Well, my sense is that Scott Rasmussen is pretty close to the mark. I mean, this is more an art than a science at this point. But I see from my vantage point and my view of the electoral map that there are indeed 90 to 100 seats in play. And my guess is that the Republicans will pick up north of 50, somewhere 55, perhaps close to 60 if everything goes right for them.
Okay. Well, Doug, recently here on Newsmax TV, I interviewed Senator John Cornyn and Representative Pete Sessions, the heads of the National Republican Senatorial and Congressional Committees. While Representative Sessions predicted what he called a tsunami for the House, Senator Cornyn, though optimistic, was much more guarded and cautious about Republicans' chances for the Senate. Do you see the GOP winning back the Senate?
Well, right now the Real Clear Politics average shows the GOP picking up a net of 8 seats. There are a number of very, very close races. Indeed, virtually all the toss-up races are very close. But assuming that the Republicans do pick up 7 or 8 seats, there are 2 seats in the West, in the state of California and the state of Washington, that would have to go Republican for the Republicans to win the Senate. And they would also have to hold the lead that they've been maintaining in the state of Pennsylvania, which has been moving back to the Democrat Joe Sestak from Republican candidate Pat Toomey. So if all the seats break right for the Republicans and they win a breakthrough in West Virginia with John Racy, then and only then will they win the Senate. But that's really drawing to an inside straight, Kathleen, and at this point, if I had to bet, I'd bet that they don't win the Senate.
We'd like to get your thoughts real quickly on some of the key races, lightning round, if you will. Nevada Senate race, Sharon Angle versus incumbent Harry Reid. This is a close one. Do you think Angle pulls this one off?
I think Angle pulls it off. The early voting is showing more Republicans than Democrats voting in Clark and Washoe County. Sharon Angle did very well in the debate. My sense is she wins narrowly.
All right, the Senate race in Washington, Democratic incumbent Patty Murray faces a challenge from Republican Dino Rossi. Polls right now have this one pretty close.
Yeah, it's within the margin of error. Patty Murray is slightly ahead. The president is traveling there as we speak now. My sense is, if I had to bet, the Democrats narrowly, hold on.
What about California? Polls have Meg Whitman and Carly Fiorina with narrow leads over Jerry Brown and Barbara Boxer for the gubernatorial and Senate race there. How do you see these playing out?
Again, I see very, very close races. If I had to predict, I'd say that Jerry Brown will probably hold on to win the gubernatorial election. And if I had to bet, I'd say that Barbara Boxer manages to beat Carly Fiorina just by a hair.
Another high-profile race, this one in Delaware, Tea Party favorite Sharon O'Donnell versus Democrat Chris Coons. Polls are suggesting Democrats will keep Joe Biden's old seat. Is O'Donnell finished?
I think she is. I think that she's expressed regret that she ran that so-called witch ad. I think it was a mistake. I think it reinforced all of people's stereotypical fears about her. And with a double-digit lead, I think Chris Coons is poised to win that seat.
What about Florida's Senate race? Marco Rubio has a lead over independent Governor Charlie Crist and Democrat Kendrick Meek. Do you think Rubio cruises to a victory?
So far, all the polls are suggesting to me that Rubio will win comfortably. His lead has been anywhere from 8 to 12, 13, even 14 points in recent polls, and there's no reason to suggest, I think, that Rubio will be anything other than an early winner on election night.
Also in the Sunshine State, Democrat Alex Sink is challenging Republican Rick Scott in this very close gubernatorial race. Newsmax recently endorsed Rick Scott, and polls have him winning by a narrow margin. What is your take on this one?
Boy, this one is too close to call as well. I don't really have a clear sense there. I guess if I had to bet, I'd bet that Rick Scott will pull it out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Sink pulled one of the big upsets of the night.
You touched on this race earlier. In Pennsylvania, Republican Pat Toomey versus Joe Sestak, a Democrat.
I think ultimately Pat Toomey will win that race. I think there's a desire in Pennsylvania among those white working class voters we were talking about to reject Obama policies. I think that will be enough with the vote in Western Pennsylvania to narrowly elect Pat Toomey. But again, another nail biter.
All right, to Kentucky. Tea Party favorite Republican Rand Paul is facing Jack Conway.
Again, it's been a bitter race, but I think that Rand Paul will probably pull out a slight victory. He's been leading in all the polls, and my guess is he'll win by 2, 3, perhaps 4 points.
One more, Doug, and you touched on this one earlier as well. In West Virginia, Racy versus Manchin.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that John Racy wins the race. Joe Manchin's been a popular governor. He's run a smart campaign distancing himself from President Obama. But given that the president's approval rating in West Virginia is about 32, 33%, I think the state is poised to elect a political outsider, perennial candidate, John Racy, to the U.S. Senate.
Is there any good news for Democrats, and what surprises do you think Republicans will see on Election Day?
I think the only good news for Democrats is that they probably will be able to hold on to the West Coast seats and limit their losses to probably, my guess, is about 8 seats. And if they're able to hold on to the Senate and lose the House probably overwhelmingly, given how much the country has turned against the Democratic Congress and President Barack Obama, that will be good news for the Democratic Party.
Doug, let's say we see what's been called a Republican tsunami. They take the House and/or Senate. You were there in '94 advising Bill Clinton when this happened. He moderated and moved to the center. Do you see that potentially happening here with President Obama?
You know, I'm a moderate Democrat, Kathleen, and I believe in centrist, fiscally sound, socially moderate policies, but I don't see it happening. The president has signaled that he's not going to change his position or positions after the election. I think practicality may well force him to alter how he approaches things, but I hope for the country's sake that we're able to get into a period of conciliation and agreement after what we've been through for the last almost 2 years.
Last question, Doug, for you real quickly. This one on a developing story. Political commentator Juan Williams was fired from NPR after making comments about Muslims on Fox. Mike Huckabee and Sarah Palin both say NPR should be defunded. What is your reaction to all of this?
Well, my reaction is a slightly different one. I was profoundly saddened. National Public Radio is supposed to be exactly what it says it is, public radio. And the fact that somebody like Juan, who is an independent thinker, but a Democrat and somebody who has been outspoken in his support of the Democratic Party in opposition to the Republican Party, the fact that he was fired for making an entirely, in my judgment, understandable comment that reflected widespread fears is, to me, just plain wrong. And if he had made any sort of comments that were hostile to Muslims as people or stereotyped them, fair enough. But you know what? I know Juan. Juan is somebody who is a supporter of and participant in the civil rights movement. He is a supporter in racial equality generally. He is a person who puts intellect and logic above all else. And to do this to him is, I think, a profound injustice.
All right, Doug Schoen, thanks so much for joining us and for your insights. And by the way, congrats on your new book, Mad as Hell, in bookstores and available at Amazon.com. It's always great having you here on Newsmax TV.
It's always a great pleasure, Kathleen. Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.